What's up, guys? Speedaholics here. And anyways, one of the most common questions that you hear on the internet is, what are some of the best sports cars that you can get for a cheap price? So anyways, in this video, I'm going to discuss what I think are 5 of the best cars that you can get for less than 20 grand. So first up, we're going to look at the E46 BMW M3. And the E46 ran from 2000 to 2006, and it was powered by a 3.2-liter straight six that made 330 horsepower and about 260 pound-feet of torque. And that was good enough to get it from 0 to 60 in anywhere from the high 4 range to the mid 5 range, depending on the transmission option and whether it was the coupe or the convertible. So while that's still pretty fast by today's standards, the major downside is that you're buying a pretty old German sports car that's probably going to have a lot of miles on it. So the reliability and the maintenance costs are probably not going to be very good, and you should definitely plan on saving some money to pay for some potential costly repairs, which may or may not pop up, but when it comes to buying an old German sports car like this, it's probably better to be prepared. So next up, we've got the C5 Corvette, which ran from 97 to 2004, and it had the 5.7-liter V8, which made 350 horsepower and 360 pound-feet of torque, and it would do 0 to 60 in the mid-4s. If you're thinking of buying one of these cars, you should definitely look into buying the 6-speed manual instead of the 4-speed automatic, because not only is it a more thrilling and exciting driving experience, but you're going to get much better gas mileage cruising on the highway with those 2 extra high gears. Now, obviously, someone looking for a Corvette is probably not that concerned about gas mileage, but it is nice to just have those 2 extra gears for highway cruising. Now, being an older generation Corvette, the main downside is going to be the lack of interior quality. However, the performance and the styling are, in my opinion, still up to today's standards. I still think it looks good, albeit not as good as the new Corvettes, obviously, and the 0 to 60 and the quarter mile times are still very impressive. So next up, we're going to look at the Porsche Boxster, which is a little tricky because the Boxster has not really had any generation, so to speak, and it also has a couple different engine options, and it has anywhere from around 260 to 280 horsepower for the purpose of this video that we're looking at, and 260 to 280 pound-feet of torque. Now, obviously, the newer models have much more than that, but those will obviously be way out of the $20,000 price range, and for about $20,000, you can probably find one that will do 0 to 60 in the low 5s, and that is if you can get your hands on an S, which I would highly recommend, which has the bigger engine and the higher engine output, and it also has the dual exhaust, which looks cooler in my opinion than the single exhaust outlet. Now, similar to the M3, the reliability on this car is going to be pretty sketchy, being an old Porsche. And the performance for the money is still pretty good, but I would definitely be wary about buying this car if you're tight on money and if you're afraid of high maintenance costs. So at number 2, we have the Nissan 350Z, which ran from 2003 to 2009, and it had a 3.5-liter V6 making anywhere from 287 to 305 horsepower and 260 to 280 pound-feet of torque. And it does 0 to 60 in the low to mid 5s, depending on the coupe or the convertible. And when it comes to these cars, I would not recommend getting the convertible unless you absolutely want it, because you're going to be paying another probably $1,000, maybe even $1,500 for the convertible, which is not worth it unless you're actually going to be using it a lot. Now, a huge advantage for this car is that you can potentially get it for less than 10 grand, depending on the mileage, the transmission, the condition, and the submodel, which leaves you a lot of room financially to put some aftermarket upgrades on this. And you can make it pretty fast if you put a turbo on there, even just throwing on some bolt-ons like exhaust, intake. Similar to the Corvette, the interior quality is not going to be all that great on these. If you get the touring model like I have on my Z, it's pretty decent with the leather seats, the heated seats, and some other nice amenities, but in terms of the plastics that are used on the interior, they're not that high quality. However, you can get over this because, as I said, the performance is pretty good, and there's tons of room for improvement. So finally, we have the 2012 to present Mustang, and the reason why I say 2012 to present is because starting in 2012, Ford updated the engines. They went from the 4.6 to the 5.0 in the GT V8s, which made around 410 horsepower. And in the V6s, they went from around 220 to about 300 horsepower, which is a pretty significant increase. Now, if you can find a GT for less than 20 grand, it's probably going to be the fastest car on this list. And I would definitely say it's probably the best option, seeing as it has the newest technology features, and obviously the main downside is that you see tons of Mustangs, and it's probably the less exotic, so to speak, out of the 5 cars on this list. But in terms of performance, I personally think that this is probably the best one. Now, if it's a V6, you can make the argument for pretty much any car on this list. But in my opinion, the GT V8, if you can find it for less than 20 grand from 2012 to present, I would definitely think that that is probably the best car on this list. So let me know in the comments, guys, did I leave out any that you think should be on this list? Which one is your favorite out of these on the list? And yeah, so thanks for watching. Please subscribe and stay tuned.